This episode is brought to you by Espolón Tequila. Slow, sticky, snoozy. They call these the dog days of summer. But Espolón? They don't do boring. Welcome to the Marg Days. Espolón Tequila. 100% blue Weber agave, born to shake up your summer. Just add lime, agave, and a little attitude. Visit espolontequila.com. Espolón Tequila, 40% alcohol, volume 80 proof. Copyright 2025 Campari America, New York, New York. Drink responsibly.
No matter how you travel, it's good to have a plan. Some people plan every minute. No sleep, bus, museum, another museum. While others only plan to take it day by day. When it comes to your finances, a plan is just as important. You can count on Credit Karma to give you the insights you need to understand your options, so you can take charge of your financial path and find your way to money. Explore how you can make financial progress with confidence today. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on.
Just always supposed to progress, and every single week they're going to PR, and every single week your speed is going to get higher. When realistically a speed journey looks like this, does it go up over time? Yeah, of course it should. Whatever the case is, a speed journey is not going to be just this continuous linear regression. I think that it's hard for them. And that's one of the other hard things about ranking and publishing is if you're giving these data points to these athletes every single week.
Welcome to this episode of Sprint-Based Football, presented by Titan GPS. Founded and based in Texas, Titan GPS is your key to sprint-based football success. Designed specifically for high school football, Titan tracks the metrics that matter, like top speed, explosive acceleration, and even the powerful truck stick, speed times weight, for the ultimate performance insight. Whether it's optimizing practice, spotlighting players with 3D highlights, or giving recruiters verified in-game stats, Titan delivers. And with no minimums to get started, Titan walks you through every step. Message them on X @TitanSensor to learn more. Titan GPS, performance measured, potential unlocked.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Buying a car shouldn't eat up your week. That's why Carvana made it convenient. Car buying that fits around your life, not the other way around. You can get pre-qualified for an auto loan in just a couple of minutes and browse thousands of quality car options, all within your terms, all online, all on your schedule. Turn car buying into a few clicks and not a full week's endeavor. Finance and buy your car at your convenience on Carvana. Financing subject to credit approval. Additional terms and conditions may apply.
Hey, this is the Sprint-Based Football Podcast. I'm so excited to have Cici Murray today on the podcast. I met Cici last September at the Speed Summit with Les Spellman, and I was blown away by a presentation she did at that time. So I can't wait for this one. Cici, I can't wait to talk to you. I haven't talked to you since last September. So tell me what's new in your life.
Since last September, well, a good amount of things, but I would say mostly all good things. The business has been progressing. Now I've continued on with the same teams that I've had. I've added new athletes. I've probably not lost any, which is a good thing. And everyone's gotten faster, so no complaints.
So do you work mostly with football?
Yeah, I would say probably 90%. I have a good amount of baseball, soccer, lacrosse, but I would say that my general audience, my biggest group is football for sure.
So don't take this the wrong way, but it's just so unique to have a woman involved in football. I'm still a little weird hearing a woman announcer, for a football game because we just grew up with men in the sport and everything. And it's starting to change now. I think flag football is going to be a huge thing for women. But how did you get involved in the training aspect of football?
Yeah, I think it is being a little bit more widely accepted. I just had my NFL guys this morning and we were talking about routes and they were laughing and they're just like, I just still can't believe to hear a female talk about this kind of stuff, So we're still kind of paving the way, which I'm fine with. I don't mind it. But I started my journey in physical therapy, actually. When I was in college, I worked in a physical therapy office and we worked just kind of with a lot of athletes. We had a lot of high schools in that area. And so I just got along really well with the athletes and just kind of really started going to their practices and their games and talking with their coaches and just kind of wanting to learn more. I was still young at that time. I think I was a freshman in college when I really started going to experience a lot of those practices and games and just interacting with the coaches. And I got presented an opportunity to coach a 7-on-7 team. So at the time I was like, why would you guys want me to do this? I thought that there was plenty of other people that were more qualified for that job at the time. And it was like, hey, you're at all of our practices and everything anyway. You sat in our classroom and learned about route trees and learned about our plays. Why wouldn't you? So I did that and I loved that and I had so much fun. And I think that is what kind of projected me into more of like the football space. So I just continued to work with football players. I took some of those guys from the physical therapy office or from the 7-on team. And I was just like, hey, let's go train this weekend for free. Let's go to the park down the street or let's go to the high school. And they were like, what are we going to do? I'm like, I don't know yet. We'll figure it out, And back then we had parachutes and bands and that's all we had. And we used what we had access to and that's fine. And it's funny looking back at it now, but now I look back at it now and I'm like, hey, those are still guys that I talk to this day, work with to this day. So something stuck. And I just kind of continued on that path. I started working with an NFL guy and he was just like, hey, whatever you do, you got to run with this. You got to keep going on this path. And so I continued kind of working with that same population. And one of the NFL guys, I met his speed coach at that time. And he was like, hey, I think you have a little bit to learn, but I think that you could be really, really good at this. And that was January of 2020. And now we're here.
Have you always been in Orange County?
Yeah, I've always been in Orange County.
And who were the football people that influenced you the most?
As far as coaches?
Yeah, or players.
So the coaches that I first started working with, Billy Hobert and Billy Neely, they were the kind of creators of this 7-on-7 organization that I first worked with. And they were so just keen to having me sit and learn and watch and understand. And, I've always watched football with my dad and I've always been around football just with the athletes that I worked with. So I knew what they had to do. So it kind of made sense that I kind of went into that space. And then the first NFL guy that I worked with, I literally happened to be sitting next to him at dinner and he was in a boot and he was like, hey, we should work when I'm out of this boot. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And he was like, no, I'm serious. Called me when he got out of the boot. When he was good to get on the field, I was like, hey, let's get you on the field. And he's like, with you? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Knew what he had to do in his game. So we did that. And he was like, yeah, this is it. You got to keep going. So
I would think you probably have learned as much from your athletes as anybody. Athletes are really good at knowing themselves.
Yeah. And it's hard to explain to somebody that doesn't work with athletes, but athletes will always show you things about yourself and they will always expose truths about yourself as a coach and quite honestly about your confidence, I think. When I was first getting started, I had to go and I had to demo and look so silly when I was still learning it. So I had to go and demo and mess up in front of millionaires and 15 NFL players and let that be my teacher. And I told myself, I was like, okay, I know I looked stupid doing that. So let me go and practice this 1,000 more times until I don't look stupid and the professionals don't have to laugh at me. And, when I still work with those guys. So it's like, they've kind of seen my path as well. But I think that was a big lesson for me as well.
What were you as an athlete?
I played volleyball. Mediocre athlete though, super, super mediocre. So
You're tall though, right?
That helped. That's what helps.
That helps.
Kind of balanced out the skill versus the height. It's like, we've got to find something, common ground.
And tell me about how you met our mutual friend, Les Spellman.
Yeah. So I was working in a sports rehab center and I was working with one of his NFL guys and we were kind of doing some, recovery, return to play, things like that. And then Les came in with him. And that's when I had a conversation with him and he was like, your work ethic is unmatched. I've never seen somebody I've just seen work hard and know what they're talking about and not be afraid to be wrong and not be afraid to fail and be willing to, be coached and to learn and say, I don't know if you don't know. He was like, so if you ever want to work together or connect or something in the future, let me know. And I ended up leaving that facility that I was at. And I called him up one day and I was like, hey, let's connect. And he was like, yeah. He's like, I have a bunch of guys tomorrow morning that I think you probably know some of them. He was like, just come say hi. So I did. I went and said hi to a bunch of the guys that I knew, and I was just kind of helping out, being resourceful and kind of moving around and keeping, a good vibe for the session. And after that, he was like, yeah, we gotta figure something out.
Yeah, I tell people that Les is probably the most charismatic coach type of guy that I've ever met. I met him, I think 5 years ago, or maybe 4 years ago in Fort Lauderdale at a thing called The Clinic with Les Bellman, myself, Tony Villani, and Joey Gracio. It was just 4 speakers. And it's the first time I'd ever met Les. And yeah, he has an attraction like really nobody I've been around. And of course, we're kind of like joined in a business way with USR. And is your facility a USR facility?
Yeah, so I've been a speed lab. I've been open at my facility now for about a year. And so I've been a speed lab kind of since I started. And yeah, it's been obviously very beneficial to my business and the success. And as you've said many times before, Cord Rank and Publish is huge. And I think that gives all these athletes an opportunity to just kind of, stay in the know and stay competitive, and just knowing where they're at, or their parents knowing where they're at, being able to follow that journey.
For people that are questioning, like, what's this USR thing? It's Universal Speed Rating. I get that confused. I'm always thinking anyway. And to be a speed lab, there's several advantages that people get when they join. Is it mainly educational?
I mean, I think that's invaluable. The education and the resources that are available through USR is incredibly, incredibly valuable. But I find the relationships that I've gotten from that is truly just a network of coaches. I've had so many conversations. I mean, now we're over 150 speed labs, and the conversations that I've had, or the connections that I've been able to make, and relationships that I've been able to create with people in so many different areas. And I can refer, if I have an athlete that is on a bye week and they're somewhere close to another speed lab, I can send them there and know the work is going to be good quality. And so I think that has been huge for me. It's hard, when you're coaching and you're kind of in this little bubble of your own area and where you are. And yeah, it's a small world for people that are around your area, but it's hard to branch out unless you're at speaking engagements, or unless you're at seminars or things like that, to just kind of connect. And I think that the USR gives a really good bridging of that too.
That's kind of what I sense too. I recently did a webinar with Brian Kula for USR, and we joked that USR is putting the cult into culture.
Yes.
And that's kind of referencing this idea of a tight network. And I noticed when I went to the summit in Dallas last September, it's in Austin this September, but in Dallas, I just noted people felt like they belonged. Even if it was the first time they'd ever met people, they felt like there was a belonging. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's it's nice because there's such a mutual kind of commonality and middle ground of like, hey, we can connect on this, and hey, you're also a really good person. I would argue that my best quality as a coach is that I try to be the best person that I can be, and I try to create the best people, and them being athletic and getting faster is kind of like a byproduct of that. So having that many people that you can bounce ideas off of or share knowledge with. And I get emails and questions all the time, every week, about, hey, how do you test this? Or what's the best way of doing this? And truthfully, I think that that's so valuable to them, and also to me, to continue to kind of share my knowledge and things that I've learned. Because not that I've been doing this for as long as you have even, but as long as I've been doing this, like, I have picked up what has worked and what hasn't, because I think that also working with that big of a variety of athletes, just from sport to skill level to age, has given me enough experience that I can kind of share, like, oh, hey, I did this in the past, actually didn't love it, didn't give me great ROI. So, hey, I suggest you do this. And this has helped me more.
And the last thing about Les, you'd have to be living under a rock not to know this, I think, but he deals with more first round NFL draft picks than anyone else in the nation. And is that intimidating to be around the number of future millionaires? Or actually, in today's world with NIL, they're already millionaires, but it's crazy, isn't it?
Actually, I've talked about this a lot recently. I think just the game has changed a lot, in a sense of, for my draft guys, like, they're coming to me in January and they're already rich. They're already millionaires. And it's somewhat of a hurdle for me just off the bat, because one, I'm a girl. you're a millionaire, you've been good for 10 years and people have told you that you're good for 10 years. And then you come out here and you're training with a girl and it's a little bit different. So intimidation, I wouldn't say necessarily intimidation. I think that I've been around it enough to where it's not intimidating. It's just that I know that my main goal is to keep them healthy. So I wouldn't, that's more important to me than anything else. And obviously them running a fast 40 is kind of the main goal, but how can they run a fast 40 and still be healthy is the only kind of thing that I'm looking at with them.
Which that's a great segue to one of the things that I believe so much. And I got this really from Kyle Bolton, who's a friend of Les and mine. And when he was working at TCU, he spoke at one of our clinics. And I asked him how come at TCU they were sprinting speed training 3 times a week in season. And he gave me an answer I didn't expect. He said, health.
Yeah.
Health. And from that point on, I'm like, health is almost synonymous with speed, 100%. And unhealthy is synonymous with an athlete that is slower than he should be. And so when you're working with speed, you're kind of working with health at the same time.
Yeah, it's a balanced act for sure there too, especially in season. You run into, okay, they're already practicing for 3 hours. How can I get their exposures in? But if I don't get their exposures in, they're going to get hurt. It's just kind of how it goes. And I have accumulated so much of this data, I think, just because I've been on staff with a high school football team in season, off season for 3 years now. And I think I talked about this at the summit a little bit, but I went to the head coach and the athletic trainer when I was putting together my presentation, because though I knew of it in my head, I knew mentally like, hey, I don't think we've seen as many injuries. I wanted to make sure that that was correct. And I kind of wanted to get just a ballpark range of what they thought. And I go to the head coach and the athletic trainer and I'm like, hey, do you guys have any type of idea of between now and, say 2 years ago, what the difference in soft tissue injuries is? And the athletic trainer looked at me and he said, I can give you a range. He's like, but to be honest, we just don't have them anymore. I don't see any kids for that really anymore. There's going to be things that are a flare up or something like that. But at the same time, how good is your warm up? How many times are they getting exposed to these high speed efforts? And when they have to do that, are they prepared? Is their body prepared? And the answer was yes to all those questions.
I just, we call this the sprint-based football podcast. And this sprint thing is obvious. You always want to be the fastest team. And nobody would say, no, I think I'd rather be big and slow. Everybody wants to be the faster team. But the hidden stuff behind a sprint-based approach is availability, where kids are not getting hurt. There's something magic about sprinting. And if you are going to sprint, you probably need to reduce those practices maybe from 3 hours to 2, because the more time, more volume you have, the slower you are the next day. So the things that you talked about last year in Dallas, can you talk about some of the changes you implemented in that program? And then besides just the fact that generally soft tissue injuries disappeared, tell me some other things that happened.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that what I'm doing is this crazy change. All I told the head coach was, hey, give me the first 30 minutes of practice. Give me the first 30 minutes of practice. I send them to you. They're already warmed up and they get what they needed. And then you guys continue the rest of practice. So now you have a 2-hour practice instead of a 3-hour, and they got what they needed. And that's kind of all I need. And I think that the year agreement that we came after one off season of working with them. And in the off season, I had a little bit more time. I worked with them 3 days a week. I had them for an hour and we did great and everybody did great. So then, when it came down to, I think that these kids would really benefit from speed in season. How am I going to lay this out to the head coach where everybody knows you got to practice for 3 hours, you got to do 2 days, you got to do conditioning, you got to do all this stuff. How am I going to tell this guy that I think that we should add in 30 minutes of speed twice a week? So we had the conversation and I sat down with him, and before I could say anything, he was like, okay, well, how do we keep this going in season? I said, perfect. Give me 1 hour a week and I can guarantee you that we can make changes. And from there, it was obviously less injury. Everybody PR'd in season from every skill position, every lineman. And I even told him before we started, I said, hey, my goal isn't even necessarily to get them faster in season. My goal is to maintain them, make sure that they're exposed to what they need to be exposed to. And that if they have to go out and hit some holy shit speed on Friday, then they're going to be just fine. And that's kind of what happened. And I think that they saw a visible difference and a visible transfer in the game. And I think that one major piece was, we had other spectators that were coming to the games and were like, dang, these kids are like flying around the field. And we are winning these games by like this huge margin. It's not even close. And it's some of it, regular season games were kind of embarrassing because they were like, you're making these kids look like, the other kids that they're playing look very mediocre. And so I think that it was a buy-in from the off season of work. And then that first season, it was like, hey, the only thing that we changed was adding in speed training twice a week. That's the only thing that changed from last season to this season.
I love what Tony Villani says, that speed needs to be the priority out of season, in season, all the time. But it's not the majority. You cannot sprint fast for 2.5 hours. So I love the idea that, just give me an hour a week. There's so many things I want to unpack there. Let's talk about that off season when the coaches said, how do we continue this? You must have impressed them, and it must have been a little bit different than what they were used to. Explain what an off season, you said 3 days a week?
2 to 3, yeah.
And tell me what that looked like.
Really just kind of a lengthened out session of what I do in season. I had a little bit more equipment. I had a little bit more time. So are we doing a good warm up? Perfect. Are we hitting plyos? Great. Are we doing drills? Sure. But are we running fast? Yes. That was kind of, yeah, of course. Always.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because if you're not timing, they're probably just running, right?
They're just running. And it's for me, but it's also for them. I think that you got to know your audience. And I did for a long time. I was making sure I was timing with my younger athletes just because it gives them a competition factor, it gives them something to work off of and gives them something to improve on. But even like right now in my phase 2 of my NFL offseason, everything's a competition. Hey, you got to get under 1.5 on this. Hey, you got to get above 18.5 on this, or, whatever the parameters that I give them so that they do have a goal. They do have a range. They do have something that they know that they need to hit, or a number that they know that they're striving for, which I think is very important no matter the age or anything else. Definitely time. When I get into in season, I have GPS on the 20 kids that see the field the most. So I have GPS on them every practice, every game. And then with the other kids, I'm timing like every week or every 2 weeks. So I'm doing that like on top speed days, and I'm doing fly 10s or something like that, just so that everybody still has their baseline and then their improvements and their PRs. Because I do, like I said, I do feel that that's important. But, the in-season work, that GPS stuff, I'm using that for load management, and I'm giving that to the coaches on, hey, that this is building buy-in as well with me and the coaches, is now I have to have conversations with the position coaches where either they have too high of a load and they're at a risk, or, hey, this kid hasn't hit 90 to 95% in the last 5 days. Let's change that. So I think that was huge also, as I could, kind of let them know, hey, these are guys that are seeing the field the most, and these are the guys that are the most active. And if this guy hasn't hit 90%, 95% in the last week, then nobody else has. And I think that a little bit hard about in-season stuff, and especially with football, is I think coaches and athletes think that they're hitting 100% when they're running routes or when they're doing something in practice. And I can defend that by saying, hey, here's the data. You're actually just conditioning. So I think that is another just piece of buy-in with myself and the coaches and myself and the athletes is, hey, I have it right here. If you run 22 miles an hour, but you only hit 18 all week through practice, you actually didn't hit 95%. So I think that kind of changed the culture a little bit. And that was one of the things I think that also changed the most within the program, is it was such a culture shift. I think, weight room is huge, and weight room is essential, and weight room is important. And I think that you do have to have a great strength background in order to make everything else work. But there was now just this added piece of, can I get this small advantage here? Or can I make a difference in separation here when we actually have to go out there on Friday nights? So it was a culture thing, and then just kind of believing in what we're doing and what I'm saying, and having this voice of somebody to listen to. And that's really the only reason why any of those athletes got faster and why they all PR'd, was because they trusted in me.
So with the GPS, I think when you start measuring things, you learn things. I say when you time sprints, you learn stuff. Did GPS just reaffirm the stuff that you already knew? Or were there wow moments that, like, without GPS, I would not have been thinking this way?
I think it's something that I knew myself, but I think it was another piece of knowledge that I needed to present to the coaches on why that this is important. I was able to red flag certain guys. I was able to have conversations about certain kids in different position groups. And I did, I've learned a lot. I have learned just through gathering all this data that this is information that I can not only share with the teams that I work with all throughout the team, but something that I can share with parents. I have an academy that is football, baseball, soccer. And even, with a lot of those parents, it's information that I can share with them when they're thinking about, oh, season's starting, so now I have to stop doing speed. Well, you can. That's totally fine with me, but it would be a disservice not to share information like that with you to tell you that, hey, this is actually going to end up being a disservice because if you're not hitting 90 to 95% every 3 to 7 days, it's likely going to diminish. So they can do with that information what they will. But that generally leads me to, okay, well, I don't want that to happen to my son. So, kind of let's keep them going. And as unbiased as I try to be, science is science. So
isn't it strange? I've had a lot of coaches push back against the sprint-based football concept. I was saying that they don't want to get kids hurt, so they do not sprint. And so they condition like crazy and they detrain speed qualities. Have you heard coaches talk like that?
Of course. You can't argue with people that think that they know better. So I try to stay away from it. And if that's their philosophy, I'm not going to argue with what you think is right and argue with your philosophy. I'm just going to add to it and say, well, you're conditioning already in practice. You already are. So you don't necessarily need to do a lot of extra. I get summer balls to grind. Absolutely. If you want to add some conditioning in there, absolutely. But that's not high speed efforts. So if you have kids, and especially looking at some of these skill guys, those guys have to hit those high speed efforts. Even my linemen are running the same drills and the same distances as my skill guys. So
it might even be more important for the big cats because they have not been exposed to sprint and jumps and plyos and, jumping far, jumping high, bouncing. They have not been exposed to athletic qualities. They probably were stuck into that offensive tackle position based on their height and weight. And so any type of athletic training you give to the big cats, I think it just really changes their life.
Yeah, and you're going to see so much bigger return. It's once they actually learn some of those qualities, it's like, that's kind of game over. Some of my linemen had linemen running 19 miles an hour. And are they gonna run that in the game? Not necessarily, but I say this all the time, you're never gonna be a worse athlete by being faster, no matter what. You're just not. And, maybe I'll change change of direction drills for them because I'm adding in some of those. Maybe I'll change the decel intensity, something like that. But if everybody else is running 35, 40 yards, so are the linemen.
I love it. I think that people fail to realize that if you're 6'5", 320, and you played high level, you have great tape, all that kind of stuff, but you run 16 miles an hour, you will not be drafted. And the guy that runs 20 mile an hour will become a multimillionaire in the first round.
Yeah.
And I think that people are like, well, but wait, offensive tackles, they never have to sprint. Why are we working on sprinting?
Well, what I try, and I go back to like my 2022, I believe it was, I worked with all offensive linemen for draft prep. So I had 18 offensive linemen. And the biggest thing was, hey, if you don't have a good 10, you're not going to have a good 40. You got to go and have the best 10 in the world, and then you can have a good 40. And at the same time, I'm looking at these numbers. Again, this is now 2 years into doing draft prep and into 40 prep. And I'm looking at 10-yard splits and I'm like, oh, okay, that's different, but we can work with that. And it's true. Those guys still have to train those qualities. And you see linemen that are 350 pounds with a six pack and they can move, they can run. And I kind of shifted not my focus, but I shifted a little bit of my philosophy after that year, just based on, numbers and seeing what they had to do. And though the demands might be a little bit different, the stimulus is the same.
I think coaches everywhere like to use the worst word, reverse engineer. They sound smart when they say that. I know I've said that before and felt like I was smart. But we go down some, I think, poor directions when we do that. For example, when I consult with lacrosse people, they like to do their sprints with a stick and they like to go zigzags on their sprint. Soccer kids maybe time a sprint as they're kicking a ball. A football coach will say, it's all acceleration, so all we ever do is tens. That's all we ever do. And then we do a lot of lifting and stuff. If we don't do it on the football field, we don't do it. We're not a track team or something like that. But there are certain qualities that have to be developed no matter what sport you're playing.
Yeah. And again, go back to my same point as you're never going to be a worse athlete if you're faster. I played volleyball. We didn't do any type of speed, but do I think everybody could have benefited from it at that point? Now looking back at it, absolutely. 100%. If you want to run your sprints with a stick, fine. Will it have you reaching your 100% top speed? Probably not. But, if again, I am all for answering the question on how do I get faster, being run fast more often. Run as fast as you can more often. And I refrain from just commenting back on certain things I see, on Twitter and things like that about people arguing about how fast or how slow in their eyes a 4.5 is. And I'm like, when was the last time you ran full speed?
For sure. And 4.5 at one venue might be a 4.35, another venue a 4.65. So sure. I don't even publish 40 times anymore because I still think it's the perfect length of a race. And I think it has a great connection to football, and to be a track coach, you have to get your fast football players to want to run track. So the 40 is still a cornerstone of what we do, but we just don't publish those times anymore because of the blowback.
It's also hard to compare. It's also the data and the time is very hard to compare on a 40 because the start of a 40 is so technical. And depending on what piece of technology you're using, are you using lasers? Are you doing a hand start? Are you using a stopwatch? And I ran into that a lot. Speaking of USR, I ran into that a lot, when I was collecting some of the data on the USR Speed Lab stuff. Is I'm looking at all these times and all these different starts. And I'm like, hey, I've seen a lot of 10-yard starts in my time. And so these are all so different. So the administration of it and quite frankly, like I said, just the start being so technical is hard to make that comparable data. And if you're looking at like NFL Combine, for example, that's a hand start laser finish. So that's what guys are looking at, as opposed to laser is going to be completely different. Hand time, stopwatch is going to be completely different. So
what I tell coaches is you need to develop a pretty standardized way of measuring your own stuff. And then when you record, rank, and publish it internally so that you don't get a bunch of blowback from people who say that's terrible or that's great or whatever.
And compare that to your own numbers of what they've already done. That's comparable and that's reliable and that's consistent. But and even GPS sometimes is the same too. Every GPS company, their threshold is a little bit different, or how you upload the back end session, is going to be a little bit different. So I think publishing is one thing. What everybody does with it from there is another.
Coaches, Titan GPS is the ultimate tool for football programs, including back-to-back Minnesota State champion Stewartville High School, a leader in sprint-based football. Built specifically for high school football, Titan tracks the metrics that matter: top speed, explosive acceleration, speed repeatability, and the game-changing truck stick. Titan's easy-to-use system delivers actionable insights at a glance, and their exceptional customer service ensures you're supported every step of the way. With built-in leaderboards to fuel competition and unmatched accountability, because the eye in the sky doesn't lie, champions trust Titan GPS, proudly made in the USA. Ready to join the best? Message them on X at Titan Sensor today to get started. Tell me about, you said, give me an hour a week. Can you describe the 30 minutes that you do twice a week, what that looks like?
One Excel day, one top speed day. My Excel day is a long warm-up. It is plyos for 7 minutes, maybe less. It is some resisted runs. It's some races at 100% efforts, and that is it. That's my Excel day. My top speed day, same warm-up, more plyos, just focusing on kind of different direction of forces, some wickets, some high-speed runs, and that's it.
That's interesting because I coached as the offensive coordinator at the high school a mile away from my house for a couple years, and I had to live through, I wasn't making the decisions, I had to live through like a 40-minute warm-up at every practice that included stations where you had to sprint from station to station. It was like there was no standing around for 40 consecutive minutes. And if we would have skipped the water break at the end of that 40 minutes, we would have had some guys literally die of like heat stroke or something. So the idea that we intentionally got kids tired before practice, to me, is weird. I bet your kids after that 30 minutes are not fatigued.
Oh, they're jazzed. Yeah, they're hyped. I mean, and I think we also, as coaches, and we have like this natural ability to be like, oh, well, they need everything that I need to do needs to be hard and they need to be tired. I just don't feel that way. I feel like if I can get what I need to get done in a low amount of time in a good amount of rest period, then I've done what I needed to do. Not every session you do has to be the hardest workout that they've ever done. I don't need anybody to be throwing up. I don't want anybody to be throwing up. I want you to give me 100% effort, 100% speed, and 100% intent, and then have a full rest. And in both of those days, I'm also adding in, I'm adding in some deceleration, some change of direction. It's a disservice to me, especially kind of during season, to not touch on those pieces. But my sessions are very straightforward. And I think that some people also try to overcomplicate things a little bit, or not try to, but just kind of naturally kind of fall into that because they want to do all these different things. And somebody might look at my session after 3 weeks and be like, oh, you did the same thing, or that looks boring, or I don't really care if it looks boring. I care if it works, and I care if they're healthy. And that's kind of what I've based everything off of. I've looked at GPS data. I've looked at times. I've talked with the athletic trainer and figured out, hey, this does work. Do I change it a little bit? Maybe. Do I add something in? Do I take something away? Maybe. But my foundation is always going to be the same. My foundation is always going to be, let's warm up really well. Let's hit our jumps. Let's run really fast. Let's have our rest periods. It's just kind of, it's the flow of things. And again, one of the pieces that I've really taken away just from coaching the last 5 years is how structured can you be? I think that having a good system and having a system in place, I don't really want to do something that my athletes are not expecting. I don't need to make everything so exciting and predictable. I would like a structure, and I don't need to go off of the norm because it looks cool. If it helps us, okay, sure. But if, the better system that you can have in place, then I think that the easier that it makes your life. I mean, my program for all of summer and all of season is already done. And if I need to change, based on a certain week, or if I need to change intensities based on the team that they play that Friday, then I change that. But general structure is pretty much there.
Yeah, I've been asked, I have something called the Atomic Speed Workout that several teams have implemented, just basically 10 speed drills that include some plyometrics and things and 2-time sprints. And I tell people that kids are going to feel better at the end of that warm up, that workout, than they felt before. And you use the word jazz. I love that. I use the word caffeinated. It's almost like you gave them some caffeine or something, which is exactly the way you want to enter practice. And so when coaches say, they hear that, they're thinking, and you can just imagine them thinking this, they go, would that be a good thing to do like on the day of a game? And I go, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Anything that, and I think it's all just central nervous system, right?
I get these kids, during summer, I have these kids at 6:30 in the morning. You think they want to sprint at 6:30 in the morning? Probably not. But I guarantee you the days that they have speed before practice, it is a lot easier to go at 6:30 in the morning and go into speed and then go into practice after that than it is and they, I know that because they tell me that. They're like, dang, Monday was hard. And I'm like, well, Monday was early. Well, yeah.
So here's a weird question. I've been working for like the last year with a French scientist. He works in Paris. And the idea is, like the cognitive effect of sprinting on the brain. We know that every writer that's ever written a book, whenever they get stuck, they go on a walk. It lights up their brain. Wouldn't that 30-minute warm up be great before a first period class?
100%. Or at least a piece of it, maybe.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be 30 minutes. But the idea that we get moving and get our CNS popping, just lighten up. And I just think that's a positive thing.
Yeah, I think it's like, can we minimize our fatigue debt? And can we do that by sprinting? I think that we get into, or a lot of programs kind of emphasize volume, whether that be conditioning, long practices, things that actually could end up kind of compromising speed development. How much of an effect does that actually have on our central nervous system and skill execution? And I think that, and again, I'm probably biased because I'm a speed coach, but I think that it's one of the best qualities that you can create in athletes, and it can change everything else. Like a good speed session can also create a great strength session in the weight room and vice versa. But a good speed session can create a good weight room session, can create a good practice. So again, probably a little bit biased, but that's okay.
I think speed is the ultimate potentiator,
Yeah.
the thing that makes the next thing better.
Yeah.
There's just something about that CNS wake up that really creates a better weight room session or a better practice. You mentioned equipment earlier, and there's a lot of people listening to this podcast. They got money set aside from fundraising and stuff like that. And you hate to, like drop 16,000 on a 1080 sprint without really knowing what in the hell you're getting into. What kind of equipment do you use, and what equipment seems to be your favorites?
1080, I have it and I use the hell out of it. But that's also for certain groups. I use it every day, almost every day with my NFL offseason guys. And mostly because that's a small enough group, it's a controlled enough group where it makes sense and I can get really good results from that. With a group of 88 kids, high schoolers, I'm not using 1080, and that's okay. I can do everything that I need to do with 30 bands, 30 resistance bands if I need it. Sometimes when I'm in season, I don't even use bands some weeks, depend.
What bands do you use?
Like a long green super band, a perform band or whatever. I can do everything that I need with 20 bands and 20 cones.
Yep. And what is your go-to? If I said you could only do one thing on the 1080 with football players, what would be your go-to thing to do? Resistance, overspeed, light, heavy?
That's a very loaded question. Depends on the group, depends on the scale position also a little bit. Every guy needs something different. So when you start getting into like a lot of individualized training and we start getting into profiling, that's what's good about the 1080 is if you have a group that say NFL Combine, okay, your only goal is you have 8 weeks to shave fractions of a second of 4 seconds of one event that they're going to compete at. So it is different. You are profiling and you are setting that aside, and we're doing a force velocity profile, and we're seeing what they need. And if I'm on the 1080 though, and I just have straight run drill, it's good. Yeah. Resisted runs. Give them, either a speed goal, or if they're in a group, whoever hits the highest miles per hour. It makes it fun. It makes it, you get the exposure in. And that's probably what I would say is resisted running. But the feature that I probably love the most is overspeed, because you can't really get that exposure from like a bungee, or that controlled of an exposure from a bungee.
Controlled. That's the key.
Yeah, it's controlled. And so I think that that's huge, but not everybody needs overspeed. Not everybody. Go ahead.
You mentioned force velocity profile, and I hear that all the time. You can imagine just being in the business. Explain what that is and what that tells you. You said that you look at the force velocity profile and then you go from there. Tell people that kind of glaze over when they hear that, what you're talking about.
Yeah. 1080 makes it really easy. It just automatically kind of populates it. So is an athlete more force-based? Are they more velocity-based? And at what point are they hitting that? Force velocity and load velocity profiling, again, is huge because every athlete is a little bit different based on weight, based on speed, based on skill positions. One skill guy may need heavy resisted runs. Some guys may need a better transition. Some guys may need a better velocity phase, may need a better top speed phase. So the good thing about that is, like, we used to do force velocity profiling by hand. And shout out to JB Moran, because that was certainly something that we had to spend some time.
How do you do that?
He has like a template and a table that you can plug in different numbers. And like for load velocity profiling too, you can, plug in the load, the distance, the speed at which they hit that. We've done it with sleds. We've done it compared with sleds with GPS and entered in all that information. So by hand, it's pretty manual. But like I said, everybody needs something different. If we're going back to, like I said, linemen, you got to have the best 10 in the world. Most of them didn't run a full 40, almost all of training. So what are the capabilities that they need? What is going to be best for this athlete? What is, as an individual, based on how they run? Do they have better horizontal force production? Are they better in their top end speed? Do they have a better vertical force production? So that kind of tells you at what point in the run are they strongest and what part of the run do they need work on? And based around their skill, what's important for them? and what's actually the best skill development that you have accessibility and even just, like I said, the access to change. What do you have the capability to change? What do you have time to change? So that's something that you can do and that you can create. I think that it's great. If you have 88 kids and you need to make sure that all of them are running fast as often as possible, that's what you do.
You know, it's interesting. You said bands, you got 88 kids. I usually cut my sprint group down to 35. And even then, like we'll use bands and I'll post something on Twitter or something. And somebody will say, hey, coach, you know, there's like sleds for that. And I'm like, yeah, but.
You tell me if you want a group of 30 to 80 kids using sleds and how many weight plates you need and how many sleds. I've done it. I've been there.
Yeah. And so much of what we learn as coaches is that efficiency and that how to do things. I know Chris Corfus, my business partner, was the first American coach, the first American to buy the 1080 Sprint. And it was like 11 years ago. And I remember they sent the CEO over 20 miles away to my school. And my eyes just glazed over when he said it cost $20K. It cost $20K back then. And I was like, he said, well, Chris is, he's going to not put braces on his daughter so he can afford the 1080. And, that was the big joke and everything. That 1080, if you're working with more than 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 7 kids, that 1080 really is not very good in big group situations.
Yeah. I mean, if you can section it off and you can station and make that a station, I swear by it. I think that it's an amazing piece of equipment and I will take that to the grave. Bury me with a 1080. But again, what's necessary? And if you don't have $20,000 to spend on it, then use the next best thing. And it is harder with a large group, but like when I had my 18 offensive linemen, we had 2 1080s right next to each other and we were rolling. That was a great combine prep year. So I can't complain about it. But if you can fit it into your session, and now they have the newer model, that's the one that I have that I've been using is one, it's a little bit lighter, which is nice. So you don't have to carry around one of the bigger sizes, which is also kind of a pain if you're going to different locations or something like that. But if you can utilize it, awesome, perfect. If you can't, use something else. I think that we get away from like, well, this coach has this, so I need to get that. Not always. Use what you have your resources for. I would say that the easiest, not even the easiest, but the best just piece of equipment is lasers. I also use output a lot. If you don't have force plates, great. Next best thing.
Yeah, output is interesting. We experimented with just one sensor. Transmitter, sensor, yeah, with just one. And we decided after just experimenting with that this spring, I think the sensors cost like $500. They're not terribly expensive. But if you just had 2 of those, you could station, like you were saying, if there's a station of 10 kids and you could get through 10 kids in 10 minutes, probably just sharing those 2 sensors.
Yeah.
Agreed?
I mean, I had 6 guys this morning, no station. We were everybody gets 2 reps and everybody gets enough rest. We're doing it on the field. It's right there. So I love it. I think that you need to do a counter movement jump, or if you need to do a 10-5 RSI, or if you're using it for VBT in the weight room, perfect. I think it's super accessible and something that isn't quite the investment as other pieces of technology. And I think that that's really part of like the bouncing after coaching is what do I have access to? What is the minimum effective dose? What can I get away with? And, how do I make this work for my program?
Well, the great thing about output as well, and it's just called output. And the great thing I thought about was the flexibility. We were able to gamify whatever we wanted to gamify. If we were throwing med balls as high as we could measure the exit speed of the med ball. And if a guy went 6, 6, 7, and you said, gee, you're like in last place. Well, the next one, he threw 9 miles an hour. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Things change, or 9 meters per second or whatever it was. But we just absolutely were able to gamify. And then one of the cool things when you put it on your shoe and do prime times and you're checking on ground contacts, when you are trying to improve your ground contacts, prime times are totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different. And so I think output,
it's hard to measure otherwise. Yeah.
It's all just seeing it. But I don't think when you say speed up your ground contacts, I think if you could show a number to a kid, that does a lot.
Yeah, it gives, again, same with lasers or GPS, gives them something to work off of. It's a measurable piece that they can say, oh, okay, well, maybe I know that rep wasn't good. Well, let me see what the numbers were. So,
which leads to performing in practice, which old school football never performed in practice. They were almost like intentionally slow and high effort, but just slogging around. But if you're really going to get better at the things that win, you better get better at performance, which I think that things like timing and output and 1080 sprint and anything that's measurable where you can show progress to a kid from his freshman year to his senior year, those kind of things are just,
Yeah.
they're just priceless.
It's a testament to you as a coach, but also to your relationship with the athlete, and I think that with my high school football team, I have not seen these kids less than twice a week for the last 3 years. So I have kids that I met when they were freshmen, and I met when they were in 8th grade, coming freshmen, and they were running 17.6 miles an hour, right? I have one kid that I'm just thinking of off the top of my head, 17.6 miles an hour. He was like, "Oh, coach, I can't wait to hit 18." And I was like, "We're close." And now he runs almost 22 miles an hour. Did that take a while? Yeah, it did. And did week after week, was he up 0.01? Yeah. Where's there weeks where he was down? Yeah, absolutely. But if you look at the span of his speed journey, I think that everyone thinks that their speed journey is supposed to go like this. Just always supposed to progress. And every single week they're going to PR. And every single week, even though they feel great, that their speed is going to get higher. When realistically, a speed journey looks like this. Does it go up over time? Yeah, of course it should. But there's going to be, that week I had the flu. That week I had a really hard practice. Whatever the case is, a speed journey is not going to be just this continuous linear regression. I think that it's hard for them. And that's one of the other hard things about ranking and publishing is if you're giving these data points to these athletes every single week, are they going up by just a little bit and then down? Yeah. But if you look at their journey over time, which is what I love about the USR, is I have kids that have been in the USR for 3 years. Did they start down here and then end up out here? So I think that it's good for them to see, and also good for coaches and athletes and parents to understand that it is not always going to be this straight progression every single time. So I think there's power in that as well.
There's so much motivational power in seeing progress. I had a kid when I was coaching freshman football. It was like 10 years ago, and he ran 16.4 miles an hour, which is really slow for a freshman. He was the 54th fastest guy on my freshman football team. And as a senior, he led our team to the state championship game, ran 23.1. He ended up having a good college career, and he made it all the way to the final cut for the Chargers 2 years ago. So we're talking about somebody, the 54th fastest guy on a high school freshman team, and almost making the big time. And I think that his progress fueled future progress, which you only get that if you're measuring and recording it.
Otherwise, you're just guessing.
You are. Hey, you have a newsletter?
I do, yeah. So I have a brand called More Her Speed. It's something that I started as newsletter, and I was getting just so many questions. How did you get started? And kind of what we're talking about now. What's your approach to training and all this? And, I was like, hey, this is a disservice to not share with more people that obviously want to know this information. So I created the newsletter, and then I created a women's membership as well within that space. And we have a shared Slack channel, and everybody kind of gets to share their ideas, share possible job opportunities or openings for, women in the space. So yeah, I do a newsletter. Have been slacking a little bit just with things that have been happening in my personal life, but I will be getting better at that for sure.
How do people get at that newsletter?
I have links on my Instagram. And so Instagram, Twitter, you're going to find it, or my More Her Speed Instagram also has it.
And finally, as we approach the end of this, has been just great. I saw something online that you have a productivity cheat code. Tell me about your productivity cheat code.
Wake up early. I think that I have a lot of productivity cheat codes, but I wake up normally just kind of naturally around 5:30. And it seems early, but if I'm normally waking up at like 6:30, I think that if you have that hour to spend, whether that you do what you want to do, whether you want to meditate, whether you want to drink coffee, whether you want to work out, however you do, you're already ahead by an hour. So where you would have woken up an hour, later on a normal day, now I spent the first hour how I wanted to, drinking my coffee, working out, reading, journaling, kind of getting ahead of the curve.
And you mentioned reading. I'm a huge reader. I love to hear what other people are reading. What do you read?
Kind of depends. I try to do professional versus non-professional. I need something that takes my mind off of other things. So I will read other things. But I would say that the book that I recommend the most, just to anyone all across the board, to my middle schoolers and to my mother, is the 4 Agreements. It's very short read. You can kind of skip the first couple of chapters, but I think that it is something that you can go back and read every single day if you want to. Just, there's 4 standards and practices that have helped me so much as a coach and just as a person and working with so many different types of people. So definitely the 4 Agreements. Always recommend the 4 Agreements. I always recommend everybody to have a journal. And it doesn't have to be a journal. You don't have to look at it like a journal. I'm a huge believer in writing things down. And there's this book called, which I'm sure most of everyone has read this, but Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it's an old school book, but I think that that's where everyone uses this term manifesting now. And I think that that was the original manifestation, is writing things out, saying them out loud. I did this with all of my combine and all of my pro day guys. I wasn't so big on it until this year. And I was like, let me try something new. I sat on that plane coming back from Indy, coming back from combine. And I was like, what can I change? I'm going to write down every single one of my athletes and what I want them to run. Every single athlete ran what I wrote down. So, and is that by coincidence? Probably. Is that just because they're really fast? Probably. But I wrote their name and what they will run. I wrote it down 3 times a day up until all of their run days. And they just so happened to run what I said they were going to run. So.
And that's called manifestation?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
However, people, if you're religious, then you can think about it that way. Maybe you pray about it. Maybe you write it down. But again, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. I think that that's also something that everybody can read and kind of gain some knowledge from.
Well, Cici, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for listening to the Sprint-based football series on the Coach and Coordinator podcast. Be sure to check out our presenting sponsor, Titan GPS. It's used by Sprint-based football coaches to get better data and understand the player load and how they can adjust that over the course of the season. It'll help you find out a lot about your team. It's used by Garrett Muller, who's a 2-time state champion at Stewartville High School in Minnesota. He uses it for all kinds of things, like seeing how his team's speed is progressing over the course of the season. I could say that in 2024, they actually got faster over the course of the season following their sprint-based football recipe. Titan Sensors also has the popular truck stick metric designed specifically for football and inspired by sprint-based football. Follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com. You can get our show notes there. We have articles on these episodes as well. And follow us on X at Coach K Grabowski.